welcome everybody, and welcome to those who are joining us virtually. It's my pleasure to introduce Joan today. Joan is Managing Director and Head of Groups at CEA. Joan oversees the Groups team, leading CEA's work on the growth and onboarding of new community members and providing input on organisation-wide strategy. She has an MBA from Stanford and an MPA in International Development from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She previously worked at Bain & Company, where she was a founding member of their Nigeria office. She also co-founded and directed a non-profit in Uganda and launched a fellowship related to catastrophic risks and emerging technology policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Please welcome me in welcoming Joan.
Many companies like McKinsey spend $1 million per campus per year recruiting students. This is the norm in elite professional services firms and tech companies. The Goldmans, the McKinseys, the Googles are spending millions of dollars per campus per year. And this generation of college students cares more about social impact than any generation before. I think jobs at these firms are net positive for the world, most likely, but I'm not convinced that it's the best thing to do with your career if you want to maximize your social impact. And meanwhile, social impact career services on university campuses are often understaffed or unrigorous, telling students to do things like follow their passions or handing out Peace Corps brochures. I want to make sure that smart, ambitious college students who want to make a meaningful impact on the world have the resources and the analytical tools to be able to do so. And I think that university time is a critical window. It's often the first time that people think seriously about the priorities in their life and what they want their impact on the world to be. It's a time when people make friends that might last for lifetimes and influence their values over the rest of their time. And it's a time when people aren't yet locked in, haven't chosen a grad school, haven't started a career. I mean, in the United States, you don't even have to choose your major for the first 2 years, which I know because I changed my major 4 times in those 2 years. It's possible to have values and adopt a worldview that's pretty different later in life, but I think it's much harder. And we're a data-driven community, so I think we see this as being true within the effective altruism community in terms of when people hear about effective altruism ideas and when they're most receptive. So this is a graph from the EA survey, so looking at folks that are involved in the effective altruism community. On the bottom axis, you have the age when people first heard about EA ideas, and on the left-hand axis, you have how engaged people are. And you see the spike at the beginning, which means if people hear about effective altruism ideas around college age, they're more likely to be more engaged over the course of their career. The graph's supposed to go away. This is also true of other data that we have. So the OpenPhil long-termist meta team ran a survey of 200 folks that had long-termist careers they were particularly excited about last year. And those people reported that they first heard about EA or EA-aligned ideas when they were 20. And they also reported that it would have been optimal for people to hear about it earlier. So university time is a really critical time to expose folks to ideas related to effective altruism. And I think that given this really big gap we have in social impact career advice, we're a community that could help revolutionize that space. We have some really powerful ideas, like the idea that if you focus on a particular intervention or a particular cause area, you could have 10 or 100 times the amount of impact as with your donations. Or the idea that you could have the equivalent impact of convincing 10 or 100 of your friends to have social impact careers. I also think we have some of the best resources that are available on thoughtfully planning your career. And at this conference, you've heard we have some financial resources and we have a lot of problems that we need smart, ambitious people to solve. But what I think we really need is talent on university campuses in order to spread these ideas to more people. So I want to paint a 3-year vision that I think we might be on track to hit as a community. So by 2024, for the top 200 universities around the world, so these are, strong universities in the US and Europe, but also I'm talking about the IITs of India and the University of São Paulo in Brazil. I want the majority of students to be able to hear about effective altruism, and for people who are curious to encounter a nuanced version. So this might look like something like if you go to a student activities fair, you get to hear, one of the booths that sticks out in your mind is the effective altruism student group. Or there's a catchy flyer that you see in your dorm room that tells you about an 8-week reading group for a student-led course related to how to do the most good with your career, which introduces you to rigorous frameworks, thought-provoking questions, and shapes how you approach university for the next 4 years. This past semester, we had 45 groups that were at this level that I just specified. Last year, we had 15. I think it's definitely possible that we could get to 200 in the next 3 years. And in some places, I'm really excited about us going even deeper. So by 2024, I think we could have 12 effective altruism campus centers with 2 full-time staff and physical office space in universities. These campus centers would provide some of the best, most thoughtful social impact career advice. Staff at these centers would help students learn and connect, helping them have specific career-focused programs and plans, helping them dive into cause-specific fellowships, and being nodal to connect them to other professionals and come to regional and global conferences like this one. I also think they would help students navigate new internships and career opportunities and funding opportunities such that they have really strong plans that they've pressure tested over the summers when they graduate from university. We'll obviously continue to pivot and learn along the way, but we already have programs like this that I just described running at Cambridge and Oxford and Stanford. And I think it's certainly plausible that we could have 9 more in the next 3 years. But I think that's just what we're on track to do. What's really exciting is with ambitious entrepreneurs, we could do so much more. I think it's very plausible that someone in this room could help us continue to write the book on how to do field building at university. So if we're in the process of writing a book, I feel like we're in the first chapter. And we have a pretty good first chapter, but we need people to help us rewrite it and help us write the next couple chapters. So for example, maybe an entrepreneur in this room would think about, instead of having a hiking pre-orientation program as a pre-orientation program at universities, what would it look like to have a really great social impact career advice pre-orientation program? And that becomes so popular at their university that other universities start copying it. Or what would it look like to help us figure out how we get EA-aligned course content into popular first-year courses? Or maybe there would be campus centers that would run a fellowship with nominations as competitive as Fulbrights or Rhodes. And maybe most of the Fulbrights and Rhodes scholars would be open and excited about effective altruism ideas on campuses. Maybe the Goldman Sachs recruiters would view the campus center leaders as a little bit of a threat. And maybe the career staff providing career services would start copying the programs that the EA campus centers are running because they're so good and so in demand. What I think is most exciting about this vision, especially for people in this room, is the question of who is most well-positioned to execute on it. And I think that's current university students and recent alumni. And I think this is a pretty exciting concept because in most careers in general, and in EA cause areas, you have your pinnacle impact, your peak impact at the end of your career, when you're in your 50s or 60s. But EA outreach on university campuses is one of the only times you're an expert at your university when you're in your early 20s. It's a uniquely outsized impact for your age. And why is that? I mean, you know your users. You know how to share EA ideas with other students. You know what pizza brings people to meetings. You know about the campus. You know when students are busy and really, really busy. You know which professors are great to work with and what new initiatives are being run. That's why we have students who are working part-time while they're full-time students on running their EA groups, and students taking gap semesters and gap years, and working full-time after they graduate. And one thing I'm excited about is that we've recently seen if a university has a really strong student group, we can bring in alumni from a different university to help run campus centers full-time. If you're a university student, I think there's a chance that the next 1 to 2 years could be the highest impact that you have, even if you go on to other specializations afterwards. It's not guaranteed, but it's certainly plausible. And I think that basically comes down to multiplier effects. The idea that you could counterfactually get someone involved in effective altruism who wouldn't otherwise be, or wouldn't otherwise take the ideas as seriously. And I find it really powerful to think about multiplier effects by thinking through specific examples. So I think back to the group that I was a part of when I was in grad school, and I think through what people are doing now. And one person in that group went on to work with charity entrepreneurship, helping start a charity that sent SMS reminders out to mothers in India to vaccinate their children, and now is a data scientist at the World Bank. Another group member helped create partnerships with fast food companies to introduce plant-based meat options in fast food restaurants across the US. Another group member changed their thesis early to write about pandemics before COVID came out, then was involved in the global COVID response and helped influence $10 billion of funding related to pandemic preparedness. One of my favorite stories is about a friend who was in this really unique window of trying to decide what their PhD was going to be on, and got introduced to a series of very influential people in the process when they were deciding this topic, and ended up switching their PhD focus to focus on a specific emerging technology. And it was really important they had the conversations that the group introduced them to at this time, because they were about to choose an advisor and they were about to choose a topic and be locked in. And they knocked their PhD out of the park, and 2 weeks ago they started at the White House. So I think there's a lot of impact that can be had by being someone that's doing field building work. And other people in the meta space who are experts would take this even farther. Not just that it's impactful, but that it could be one of the most, if not the most important decades for field building and meta work. That's because if you think we're going to be bigger soon, then opportunities for movement building will be less good in the future than they are now. There's more low-hanging fruit. And if you think we're at a hingy moment related to transformative technology, then doing things earlier matters more. So some of you guys know who Buck is. He's a fund manager on the EA Infrastructure Fund and the CTO of Redwood Research, an AI safety organization. And he wrote up a memo at a recent group leaders retreat that said, the caveats are, if you're able to do student group organizing, if you don't massively hate that work, if you're at a suitable school and your school doesn't already have 2 full-time equivalent people working there, then he thinks there's more of a 50% chance that an optimal allocation of someone's time over the course of their undergraduate degree involves you spending at least 1 full-time year on student organizing. And he goes on to talk about how he thinks it's quite rare for someone who's university aged to make a contribution to EA that impresses him as much as people who run good student groups. So, we've talked about this opportunity on the table. We've talked about the university critical window and why students and recent alumni are well positioned to try and capture it and how much impact is on the table. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about what CEA is going to do and has been doing in order to support people that are in this position. The first thing is that we have foundational support for individuals that are running student groups. This semester, we've launched a program so that 2 university group leaders with a total of 10 hours a week can efficiently start a university group. We want to make sure they aren't having to figure things out from scratch. So these individuals receive stipends that free up time from their mundane campus jobs. get training on how to do intro to EA presentations and activities fair outreach, have a package of outreach materials related to funding for food and books and flyers and posters, and then have syllabus for student-led courses with thought-provoking questions and exercises and training for student facilitators. We're also really excited about the peer cohorts that are created through this, so people aren't just starting this alone in their university, but other peers around them are starting, so they can problem solve and learn from each other. And also an EA Hub, a website with resources that can be helpful to share what other things and activities have worked across different college campuses. The other thing that we have recently done is piloted our campus specialist program. So with a subset of focused universities, we want to make sure to elevate people working full-time post-graduation on EA field building in their university. We spent the summer designing this program, so we had some student leaders working out of our office in Oxford. We got a bunch of great feedback from them, and we had some really exceptional student leaders who I think have been like pioneers in this space. So James Ung and Emma Abley and the student careers team really motivated a bunch of our thinking. And we've grown our internal CEA team 3x the number of times in order to support this program. And so what it looks like for us to be able to support people who are working full-time after they graduate from university is before we used to have a 1-year grants program where you got some money and you got to kind of like go out on your own and do some work at your university. Now we're offering 2-year employment status at CEA. So you have a guaranteed job for 2 years. Comes with job security, pension, private health insurance, funding for top-end laptops and a work setup. We really just want to enable these entrepreneurs in order to build campus centers at their university. And we really value their time, which is why the salaries that we offer are competitive with the average Oxbridge and Ivy League undergrads who are graduating and getting their first job. And this is average across all fields, not just the nonprofit sector. We're investing in people's personal development. So entrepreneurs that are full-time and part of this program will have an advisor and a mentor in order to bounce ideas off of, a 2,000-pound professional development stipend, and access to things like management courses that are often used by Fortune 500 companies to train their employees. Folks in this program will have an opportunity to give input on CEA group strategy, Q&A with me and Max, and access to early strategy documents. We want deeper integration into professional networks in EA, so flights that are paid to come to EA Global and regional conferences, a prepaid expense card so people can easily access support they need for themselves and their group, and retreats with meta organizations like Open Philanthropy and 80,000 Hours. And then the last change that we're making that I'm really excited about is giving people 30% time to do what they think is most impactful. So they might want to explore how to start an effective altruism high school outreach program or building up a cause-specific fellowship. They might want to do research on their own in order to think about PhD programs they want to apply for and invest in their own career. So we want to build in a lot of flexibility for people because we are excited about the campus centers folks are building, but we're also excited about individuals and their career trajectory across the rest of their lifetime. And this is the program I just described is for folks that are working full-time on EA University field building of campus centers, but we have a similar version of this in pilot focus universities for people that are still in school and working part-time, testing out their fit for this area. We're obviously going to keep iterating based on user feedback and would love to hear from all of you about this. But one thing that I think is really important is to change the profile of what effective altruism field building looks like on university. I think it's historically been a bit low status within the EA community and hard to explain external to the effective altruism community. And I think that's changing, and we should continue changing that more. So to wrap up, the last two things that I want to touch on are the biggest misconceptions that I think have kind of like led to this mislabeling of field building within university. One misconception, I think, is that doing campus organizing isn't good for career capital. And when I step back and think about the campus centers that we're trying to build, if someone's successful, they could be having $1 million budget, managing a multi-person team, creating partnerships at their university and starting new research initiatives. That's a pretty powerful opportunity for someone out of undergrad and pretty unparalleled. And I think it's also really cool and fun to explain over Thanksgiving dinner. Like, you can say, I'm running a campus center that helps students navigate social impact careers. I think this is great career capital if you're thinking about entering meta work. The Center for Effective Altruism groups team hires people who have done a great job running groups in order to help coach other folks. But we've also had alumni go on to work at 80,000 Hours or other meta organizations. But I don't think it's just great career capital if you want to do meta work. I think it's great career capital for a bunch of other career paths. So as part of doing this, your role is to get really involved in the effective altruism community and build your own personal network so that you can support other students to do so. That's why one of the reasons why 80,000 Hours advising is making sure that anyone that's on our pilot program has access to career coaching this year. And one thing that is, I think sometimes a bit complicated to like think through is that having a really deep understanding of effective altruism ideas helps open up a bunch of different additional career opportunities. And I think that's because we're in a really early stage building effective altruism, which means organizations that are hiring aren't in the scaling position. They're like trying to develop a product or trying to communicate a complicated idea or trying to figure out product market fit. And that means they need to hire people that have a really good understanding of the ideas so that those people can go off and test out different paths to value and make a bunch of individual decisions on their own. And that's why I think I often get requests, not just from meta organizations, but a bunch of direct work organizations asking me for recommendations about group leaders that people should consider interviewing and hiring because they want people who have a really strong understanding of the basic concepts. So I think then the paths that are open aren't just in meta work, but in entrepreneurship and organizational field building and direct work as well. I can think of a group leader in the entrepreneurship space who's considering a multi-million-dollar EA-backed startup right now. I know folks that are helping to run the internal operations of Forethought and Will McCaskill's new book that's coming out, and who are really doing great work with long-termist policy advisory organizations, helping like start up really, really notable think tanks. And I know people doing cause-specific work that are group organizers or university field builders and now are top AI safety researchers, or use that as a platform to then go on to graduate school. The last thing that I would mention is if you're not sure about your cause area or your cause prioritization, then doing field building might be a really great way for you to have time and space to think about that. So I'm probably a bit biased because I spent 7 years working on a particular cause area, including a graduate school specific program that was linked to that cause area. And it was only in graduate school where I had time and space to step back and think through my cause prioritization, and ended up thinking that I should plausibly pivot and focus on a different area. And I really wish I had 2 years earlier in my career to spend time thinking about that, because that would have influenced my trajectory pretty significantly. So I think that EA field building can be really, really good for career capital. I also think it can be really good for skill development. And that's the second myth that I want us to destroy, which is that field building in university or running an EA group isn't good for skill development. And I think it can be great for, I just think about the skills that folks in campus centers and leading EA groups need. And it's people management, and it's recruitment, and it's project management, and it's running an organization, and it's operation, it's communicating EA ideas and keeping up to speed with the cutting edge ones. But I find this even more compelling when I just look at what current campus leaders and campus specialists are doing. So on the far left-hand side is Koki. Koki is helping to run a student course related to introducing effective altruism ideas to over 40 people with really diverse backgrounds around the world, and doing cutting-edge localized cause prioritization research related to the most effective donations within the UAE. That's a pretty cool opportunity for a university student. Kuhan helped start the Stanford Existential Risk Initiative and the Stanford Existential Risk Summer Fellowship. This allowed students to explore summer fellowship and summer research opportunities related to existential risk. It was so popular on campus that hundreds of students applied for a couple dozen spots, which made it more competitive to get into than Stanford itself. And finally, there's Dewey. So Dewey ran a successful student group at Durham, graduated, did some things, and then applied to work as a full-time university field builder at Cambridge. So a really cool example of someone who ran a really strong group and now is running a campus center somewhere else. Dewey now has a team of 6 people that are working with him and is creating models for what it can look like for people to do 50% their own cause-specific research and 50% cause-specific field building, including running an AI safety fellowship, which is one of the best learning opportunities for university students in the field. So I think it is not true that group organizing or running campus centers is bad for skill development. And it's really cool just to look at what some of the folks that are currently doing are able to work on. Okay, it wouldn't be an EA speech if I didn't tell you why you shouldn't consider doing this. So I'm going to tell you reasons why you might not want to consider field building right before I wrap up. If you think about the impact model looks something like you might want to think about how good you are at creating multiplier effects. And then you might want to think about the opportunity cost, if any, from doing direct work. So you should consider running an EA group or running a campus center less if you think you're not going to be as good at creating multiplier effects. So maybe this means you don't have a track record of getting folks excited about EA ideas, or maybe you might be crowding out someone who could do a better job. If you're at a really small university, or you think your university is already at the point of saturation in terms of other people promoting EA ideas, you might want to consider this less. In terms of direct work, if you think the opportunity cost of doing organizing as opposed to making progress on your own direct work doesn't make sense, the benefits don't outweigh the cost, then you might also want to consider not doing this. So maybe you have an opportunity you can't delay. Maybe you have like a co-founder and a bunch of funding and you think this is a once in a lifetime career opportunity. And if you delayed it, something like that wouldn't come along in the future. That might be a reason why the opportunity cost of your direct work isn't worth it. Maybe you think the benefit of recruiting people isn't worth what you could do during direct work for 2 years. So if you have super short AI timelines, for example, and you're doing AI safety work, this might be an example. I realize a key thing I highlighted in all of this is like, how good are you at multiplier effects? And that's kind of hard to figure out. So that's why we have tried to develop a bunch of opportunities for people to test their fit early. If people are interested in this area or interested in exploring more about whether or not they should do this, some standard advice I give to people is, first thing is have a really solid understanding of EA ideas. I think if you're trying to communicate effective altruism to other people, it's really important to do that in a high fidelity way. So I encourage people to read a lot, join EA virtual programs, be a facilitator, join your local group, really invest in yourself and develop those ideas. And then test your fit. Test what it's like to do this part-time. And many tests of this might be applying to run a student group at your university. So we have folks on our team like Jessica and Catherine that are really happy to help people get university groups off the ground if there isn't one already at your university. Or if you're in one of our pilot-focused universities, you can talk to our campus specialist team about the additional programs that we have as well. And if that's really successful, then regardless of where you are, you could be a really strong candidate for running one of our campus centers. The whole thing that we're trying to do here is just give you more information and work with you and give you more data about your comparative advantage and your fit, which is going to be localized to your university. We're going to need to do on a case-by-case basis. So I just want to wrap up by thinking about Stanford in 2015. And Stanford in 2015 had a really awesome effective altruism student group. The type of folks that came out of that were Buck, who I mentioned earlier, who's the CTO of Redwood Research, And Kelsey Piper, who now writes at Future Perfect in Vox, and does really incredible work. And Claire, who leads the long-termist meta team at the Open Philanthropy Project. And I'm so excited about the current Stanford team. But before that, in between the 2015 team and the current group that I'm really excited about, Stanford went dark. We didn't have a student group there for several years. And it makes me really sad to think about the Bucks and the Kelseys and the Claires that we missed out on in that time. And so we need you to help us make sure that future campuses don't go dark. And we need exciting entrepreneurs to make sure that the messages of Goldman and Google and McKinsey aren't the only recruiting messages that students hear on college campuses. Thank you guys so much.